What do you think is the most important thing someone should keep in mind when they look at a resume?
I will say the way they describe their
So
accomplishments.
generical applications are not working. So you have to customize your resume to the core of it and then start selling yourself. Resume is your marketing material. So you're basically marketing yourself to somebody through
I
your
love
resume.
that analogy as well, Sidhu. Like we are basically marketing ourselves, and the resume is the Hello, boys. Welcome back to our podcast. I think we are 47th episode now. Can't believe we'll be in like 50 episodes in the next 3 weeks or so. Cool. So I have an interesting topic today, but before I go there, let me ask you a question. So, what do you think is the most important thing when someone is trying to interview for a product management role?
Having the best resume.
Yeah, resume.
Yeah, that's true. That's our topic today. So, guys, I have spoken to multiple folks, and the very important thing that everyone asks is, "Hey, I'm not getting enough calls that I would anticipate, even though I have a lot of experience." And when I look at the resume, I feel like they're not doing a good job of creating that impact with that. So I want to take the topic and I want to deep dive into how someone can create an impactful resume so that they can get the interview calls. Cool. Let me start with a very simple question, right? In my head, there are like three sections, okay, in a resume. There is an overall summary, there is a professional experience, and then probably like educational experience and anything else like certifications and stuff. What do you think is the most important thing someone should keep in mind when they look at a resume?
So there are multiple things, but if I want to pick one, I will say the way they describe their accomplishments within the job. That is very important because a lot of times people are looking where you worked and kind of the work you have done more than. I don't know, certifications are all are good. Those are like a good to have but not must have. But what they're looking at is, are you a right fit for the role? That can be demonstrated by writing the experiences matching the role that you're applying.
Okay, Sidhu, what do you think?
So, before we get into that question, right? Like, if we are product managers, PMs, right? So, if we were to take the same analogy, right, how would you put a resume into context? So, who is the product here? You are the product, right? Then, what is a resume? Take guesses.
Mm, your data? Vision? No.
So,
Resume is my PRD.
no, resume is your marketing material. So, you're basically marketing yourself to somebody through your resume, right? And
Yes.
interview becomes your sales call where you sell yourself. So it's consider your resume something like a hoarding or something which you see where you get interested in that product, and that's when you actually go to that website or a place where to buy the product and evaluate whether it's a right fit for your need or not. So consider that as the same thing, right? So it's a marketing collateral which you are sending someone, and that person is actually looking to that and see if you are a right fit or not. So that's how I look at it. But uh, nowadays in LinkedIn, right, I see there's a flood of people who are applying for applications, right? So previously when you search for a product manager job, there used to be 20, 30 max. Maybe if it's a hot startup, it was 200. Now for every job, right, it is at least 200 people who are applying for it. So in this period of crunch time, what do? Would you apply a generic resume to every job you find, or would you take specific set of measures that makes you stand out as a marketing material of the product which is you? So I think I that's where I would start it, right? Think through, right? So generical applications are not working. So you have to customize your resume to the core of it and then start selling yourself to recruiters.
Yep. I totally agree. And I love that analogy as well, Sidhu. Like we are basically marketing ourselves, and the resume is the marketing channel that's promoting you. Yep. And I agree to that point as well, right? What is the most important thing that someone has to make sure is making sure that your profile is relevant for the job that you're applying. Because if you're randomly applying to a job, it's a hit or a miss. But if you customize yourself and make sure you're the right fit, then the recruiter would be interested to talk to you.
During my research, I was reading somewhere that on average, recruiter spends less than 6 seconds on a resume. So it's very important to have that right stuff, and we need to market really well.
Yeah,
That's
and I
true.
think a lot of people do this mistake, right? They just like make sure they add every point of their experience into that resume, but I think that's not serving the purpose. If you think it's the marketing material, right? So if you're marketing a product, would you list out all the products which your company has worked in the last 5 years, 10 years? No, right? You'll just message it in a way, or at least put the features that actually make sense to that target customer. So you have to customize it in a way that it hits that recruiter who's looking for a specific skill for that job.
Okay, actually, let's spend a little bit more time on that, guys. So, how do you think someone can customize it? Um, I'm sure the very first thing that someone can look at is a job description. To customize, are you guys looking at a job description and then making sure to take the points and then like customizing it that way?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of techniques to do that, right? So, right, like think of it this way: in each and every job, there is a lot of generic skills the job asks for, but there are targeted skills which the description talks about, right? Which is covered in the preferred section. Sometimes it might be platform experience for product managers, it might be ML experience or e-commerce experience, and all of that stuff. So think of it in a way that how can you actually show your work or value which you can add that brings that work into the resume, right? So it doesn't need to be something which you didn't do before, but think through, all the things which you have done, and add those bullet points that make sense for that relevant specific skill that a person is needing. So previously it used to be like a lot of jobs that are open, there were very less candidates who are applying, so you have more chances of getting picked up, right? Now if there are 200 people applying for that, there might be 10 having very specific skills and specific previous experience. It might be more appealing, so you have to make your resume in a way that it appeals to that specific skill that job description is talking about, I'd say. That's like at the overall, but we can do multiple different tweaks to your resume to make it better. We can talk about it as we go.
And a quick hack to that is, I'm sure we all have worked with recruiters. So recruiters, I mean, have their own internal softwares where they basically search resumes based on specific keywords. They pull it from the job description, because we can assume that recruiters are not specific. They don't have expertise on that role, but they know only at a high level. So to taking that keywords from the job description, and especially when you're applying for a specific role, if there is time, making sure that are on the resume will really help to pull your resume at the top, because that's very important, I felt. Otherwise it doesn't even show up in their search, and in the current market, I mean, there are thousands of people applying. It's so hard to even pull that resume, even if you are the best expert on that, but if you don't have that relevant keywords in a resume.
Yeah, I've done that in the past, right? So whenever I get like a bunch of resumes, so I ask the recruiter first, hey, can you filter out relevant resumes so that I can take a look at those resumes and then finalize someone who I want to interview? Because at the end of the day, I can't interview everyone. I'll probably be interviewing like 4 to 5 people who are the top candidates for that role. So mm, I'm also busy, like the team is busy, so I'll be asking recruiters, hey, can you give me the relevant roles first? And with the limited knowledge that they have, they'll be filtering based on the keywords, based on the experience, based on the location, based on the educational background, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was doing, my MBA, right, one of my classmates gave me a very good tick on how to customize your resume. So what he was doing is like if he was applying for 10 different jobs, right, what he used to do is he used to take all the job descriptions, put that into a word cloud and see what are the top 5 or 6 most used terms. And he used to basically make sure he target those keywords or skills in the resume, so that it's kind of relevant or customized to that. I don't know like if it's working now, but that's a tip which if you want to maybe customize your resume for 5 or 6 of the jobs, you could use that.
That's true. Actually, one more thing that I would add here is networking. Let's take an example. Let's take Google. Okay, let's say you're applying for Google Cloud, and then you're applying for one of the teams that's looking at someone who is an expert in that. So try to talk to people and then see what are the key focus areas for that year or key focus areas for the next few quarters. So try to include some of those things in your background. That way, folks would be interested to say, hey, and again, everyone will have a very clear thought process on what they want to do in the next few quarters. And if they're finding someone who has that relevant experience, everyone will be like, dude, this guy might help us like accelerate whatever we plan to do for the next few quarters. So I'm gonna try to talk to this person first.
There
Yep.
is no replacement for networking or referrals. I think that's one of the easiest way to get your resume in the hand of a hiring manager. I think that's true anytime, and but I think it's very important, especially in this uncertain times.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if we were to jump on other topic, right? So I see a lot of people also don't actually add or quantify the work which they add to a resume, right? Have you seen that before? Like even when I receive resumes and all, or some people asking me for help and all, I see they have very generic statements in their resume. I think there's not serving any purpose to anybody, right? So people.
Actually, hold on to the thoughts, Sidhu.
Yeah.
We'll go into the details about the experience. So let's start on the top first, right? So
Okay.
when I think about a resume, there are three sections. One is the overall summary. So let's start there. So when you guys look at a resume, what are the top things that you will look for in the summary? I'm sure people will try to understand what people kept there. What do you guys look for in that? Or do you think that section is useful at all?
So I'll say it's useful, and I think it's one of the most important ones to understand if that candidate has an overall experience in the relevant field, right? And sometimes hiring managers may not have time to look at like whole 2 page or 3 page resume, but that crux or 3 4 lines at the overall summary really gives them a good picture. The keywords that I look at if I'm looking at a resume is which industries did he or she work for. So and also how many number of years of experience that they have worked for. So these are the two things that I see often.
Yeah, I feel that this is like the first point of contact, right? So this is like the first impression is the best impression kind of place where you try to impress the person who's reading your resume the most. And I've seen a lot of people put their complete summary of what have they have done. Like I have this many years of experience, I've done this, which might not be kind of relevant to that job. So I feel that maybe give the number of years of experience and all of that stuff, but make sure you tweak it or customize it in a way that targets that specific job description. I think that's where we'll give you a first quick win of what is the person expecting going down his resume, right? And I think if you're able to aptly put it in a way that makes that first at least the impression for him, I think that you have done your job right, at least using that space, the summary space.
I want to add one more thing there, right? I don't know. I've never seen that summary being like exceptionally impactful when I'm looking at someone. That gives a very broad picture whether I want to go and review the additional resume or not. That is all that section is typically useful for me. And again, like you guys said, most of the people will look at that. So making sure to have like something impactful there is going to be useful for that person to go back and review. Going back to what Srinath was telling, if a recruiter is spending like probably less than 10 seconds to review the resume, you need to make sure there is something useful there in order for them to continue. One more thing that I used to typically do is, given that the top of the resume is very useful, I try to include the skills or certifications right then and there. Again, only the relevant ones for that role, not everything that you did or not everything that you did in like let's say LinkedIn learnings or like Udemy learnings or something like that, but more of like impactful ones that are relevant to that role.
Yeah, I also feel that, right, like the skill section, right? A lot of people also have a skill section after it, right? In the skills section, I think it's good to show how you have, displayed or conducted that skill, rather than just mentioning the skill for the sake of mentioning it, right? We have seen people mention Jira, right, Agile as a skill, but I don't think that's what the interviewer or somebody is looking for, right? It's more like how did you uh, practice that and made it better or learn from it is what they're looking for.
Actually, it was useful sometime back, I believe. In the olden days when waterfall was very popular, people were transitioning to agile. So at that point, if someone knows agile, it's good. But nowadays, it's like your default is agile. So at that point, putting it as agile means that okay, you're just filling words there rather than telling that it's a specialized skill for you. One more thing to keep in mind is when you put skills there, there is a very good chance that the interviewer is going to ask you those questions. So be very prepared about talking on each of those skills.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's jump into the next section then. Next one is like professional development. So this is where basically we'll be putting our current roles, current companies, what is the time frame that we are working, what is the time frame that we have been working there, and giving top bullet points, like top 4 to 5 bullet points on what we exactly did there. Sidhu, let me start with you. What do you think are the things that someone has to definitely mention in those in those statements?
Yeah, I think make sure it's not generic, right? We see a lot of people mentioning I've developed 5 features and in the last 6 months or something like that. I think that doesn't tell me anything about what the person has made or what impact which he has created, right? So make sure you put it in a way that it's quantifiable, right? I would mention, right, I'm building a product that drove revenue maybe 10 million and also increased the engagement by 10%, right? Simply having some of the OKRs here will tell the interview you are at least the impact which this person has created, and all of that stuff. It's not just the laundry list of all the things or daily tasks which you have done in that company in the last 6 months, which doesn't add any value or talk about anything that person has done. So I think follow that mantra to make sure you actually show the actual value on what you did for that specific job or role. And you could use multiple different formats for that, right? Use a verb in the past plus an accomplishment and an impact. So that could be one formula you use. Or you could also just talk about an accomplishment and impact you created and basically a verb, right? Something like that. So there are multiple structures to do that, but the more quantified it is, the more it's talk telling what impact which you have created.
And one thing which really came handy, at least to me, was following that star method. I know a lot of us follow you during the interviews, that structured approach of interviewing. Uh, and I also felt that same principle also applies the way you write on your resume. So as long as you can say what was I mean, not in very detail like how you would answer interview, but what you did, how you did, and what was the result. I think those are the three things, and it needs to be less than, I'll say, maximum 2 lines, any bullet point. I wouldn't go more than 2 points because I feel that's gonna be boring for recruiter or hiring manager.
Adding on the bullet point, I think I'm also guilty of doing that, like having like 8 or 9 bullet points under one section, but I wouldn't do that. Like I think you should be able, basically able to communicate what you have done in 4 or 5. Otherwise, it's like just a laundry list of things.
I want to go back to that analogy what Sidhu told when we started the video, right? When we think about a resume, that's what we are using to market ourselves. So this section, I think, is the most impactful section. And as a product manager, you need to show your skill set within that. So the top points that typically comes to my mind is as a product manager, you're driving the vision, you're driving the strategy, you're focused on customers, you're focused on data. All of these things should be clearly stated. Like going back to again Sidhu's point, you need to make sure you created the impact. What that basically tells the interviewer is, hey, Funny is very keen on understanding the impact of whatever he is driving. which basically means he would be doing enough research before prioritizing any kind of initiatives. Next one, as a product manager, you need to be very keen on stakeholder management, making sure everyone is on the same page before you drive any initiatives. So write points in such a way that that folks can clearly understand you are someone who loves talking to people. You are someone who makes sure everyone is on the same page before you build something. So make sure to utilize all of those points to convey all of the top skills a product manager has. One more thing I want to add here is I'm sure the product management resume varies for someone who's at a very early stages of their career to someone who is very experienced. So someone who is at a very early stages of their career should explain that, hey, I know all of these skills and I have done something that's relevant to it. But if you're someone who's at a 10 years of experience, don't tell that you work with stakeholders. Because if you're telling that you're working with stakeholders and that's one of the bullet points, it's expected. It's the minimalistic thing that is expected from you. But tell something beyond to tell what exactly is the overall impact. Where are the teams that you're driving? Where are all the teams that are located? How do you drive them? How do you create the impact, etc.? Anything else you want to add in
So
this
one thing
section?
which I also want to add for the professional development, I know a lot of people may have multiple years of experiences in various companies, but what I've realized is that recruiters or hiring managers are more interested in the latest experience than which was like 5 6 years ago, which may not be relevant. So having the clear bullet points, sometimes that can be a little, they can have maybe 5 6 bullet points versus the experience from like many years ago, where you don't, probably you just need to have one or two max. So that is very important in this professional summary, I believe.
Yeah. And
Actually, I want to
also,
add one more thing there. Cut through prioritization is something that's a very key terminology for product managers, right? So think of
Yes.
your resume also the exact same way. So you need to ruthlessly prioritize what exactly you want to show in the resume. Like Srinath Sidhu was telling, you don't put all of your features when you're trying to sell your product to someone, right? You need to ruthlessly prioritize and tell that, hey, these are the top aspects of this person. So these are the top aspects of this product, and that's what you need right there.
It's the
yeah,
most expensive space, I feel. So you
that's
need to
right.
ruthlessly prioritize.
Yeah, and also, right, like we see people doing some formatting things, right? Like uh, having too smaller font to make sure they fit everything. Don't do that. Make sure it's like 9 or above or 10, right? And also have enough white spaces so that it's easy to read. Sometimes it's very very difficult to read, right? And it's not just young people reading resumes, right? There could be a older person who's reading a resume, and sometimes it's not visible. They don't even look at the next portion of it.
Yep. Let's go to the next one, right? Education, certifications, any additional things. How much do you think that would be impactful in a resume? Sidhu, let me start with you.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I have mixed feelings for this. Like the industry standards, you have to mention some kind of education qualifications, right, in your resume. So most of the companies still look at them. So I would maybe mention like all the degrees which you have meant, and appropriate GPS if possible, or at least the timelines and all of that stuff. And I think sometimes it's also tells you if there's a gap in your experience, whether you have pursued or not, right? So that people sometimes also look that a gap is something bad, but if you have a education that you have done at this period, that kind of covers for it, right? But I'd say, make it simple, just add basic information for the degrees which you have had. uh, on the degree side, right, at least my personal opinion is that it's not relevant at this point, right? You don't need an MBA degree to get into product management, and the same with any other. You just need basic qualifications, and I've seen a lot of companies taking that minimum requirement of having a bachelor's or a master's degree out. Even Best Buy does that. I think they don't have a minimum qualification at this point, so they just look at the skills what the person has acquired over time and then hire accordingly. So do the minimum on the job side, but certifications, I don't think that they have any value. I wouldn't definitely add any certifications, at least for product managers.
Let me add a couple of things there, right? It might vary a lot, again, depending on the stage of your career. If you're very early, showing that you're very keen on doing certifications, doing courses and stuff would be impactful. But if you're someone who has like 10 years of experience, 15 years of experience, then your actually work speaks for you. So make sure to have a very high focus on the work. And if there is anything that you did very recently, or if you did something that is like very, very relevant to the profile, like you're applying as an AI product manager, and if you have certifications that are relevant to that, then add those in the top. That would have much more impact. But let's say you're applying for an AI product management role, and if you wrote about something that's relevant to cloud, maybe not very impactful.
Yeah, and also I've seen a couple of resumes in the past where people were talking about their high school and all. I mean, to be honest, those are not even needed. If at all recruiter or hiring manager looks, I think they probably maximum they would look at, okay, does he or she have a master's or a bachelor's? I don't think we need to talk about high school, secondary school, and all that stuff. You're gonna eat away a lot of space. And also, when people mention about that, I think what probably they care about is, okay, if he or she has an MBA, what major is it done? Not more than that. When did they graduate? But if you go into very details of what that is, then you're gonna eat away a lot of space.
Nowadays see a lot of organizations or these groups are selling product management certifications. I don't know how value those add actually to anybody, but I would maybe look at somebody who does a side project and show some value there rather than a certification.
I totally agree. I was just about to add that. So, whenever you're writing your professional experience, if you have something that's personal, if you have started something on your own, be it a company, be it a small project that you did on the side, if you have something like that, definitely mention that. Again, going back to the product management skill set, you are someone who's a self starter, you are someone who can drive things when there is zero knowledge about it or when there is chaos about it. So that clearly shows your passion to start and then continue things. So definitely add those things and even talk through those when you're in an interview. I have
Yeah,
a
I've
couple
seen
of
often people asking like, "What do you do outside work?" That is one of the probably one of the most common interview question, which can be answered through this. Yep.
yep. Actually, I have a couple of like simpler questions. So I was going through Enhance CV. That's one of the websites out there to get resume templates and stuff. Right? If someone is just creating from scratch, there are different types of resumes there. So there are some traditional resumes that you can look at. There are some resumes which are I don't know what is the names that they're calling, modern, creative, etc., which basically means they'll have like some side sections. They'll probably have your photo on the resume, etc. What are your thoughts on such resumes?
Yeah, so at least I feel that you are judged by the impact you create rather than the design of your resume. So making it too fancy can also be a distraction. People will look at the formatting and colors rather than what you have done. So make it simple, man. You don't need to customize the heck out of it unless you're maybe, if you're a designer, you want to do something like that, right? You want to show your work through your resume and everything. But for a basic product management resume, you don't need to, like, I've seen so many these fancy resumes which has superheroes and it has strength levels. It is all colored up. I don't know where to look at, what to look at for those things. And like, don't customize the design of it, right? Make look it plain is what I think.
I had a question. Not often. I think sometimes I saw a photo on the resume. What do you guys think about that? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's not needed?
I think so. I can give you a perspective, right? Before, I think couple of organizations which I've worked for intentionally didn't take pictures of the person because it can give you a perspective. It can lead you to a decision, right? Looking at the person, right? So sometimes people are biased towards those things, and they also have black spots, by race or whatever it is, right? So that's why it's they don't encourage you to have pictures on the resume. That's what I feel. But if you want to have it, have it.
The way I would say for that is product management don't include all of those things, because an image, what it's taking a lot of real estate on the resume, and I don't think it's adding too much value to it, unless and until you're a celebrity or you're going to a company which is relevant to marketing, or which is very focused on like design aspects. I don't think it matters. And again, even the other sections that Sidhu was mentioning, right? If you're going to Figma, if you're going to Adobe, probably they might want to see you as someone who is trying to do different things on the design front. But if you're going to a company like, let's say, Google or Facebook and stuff, they might not be looking at you someone who is very much into design. They might be looking at you someone who can drive teams, drive and create big impact. So I'm on the same page. Like, keep it simple. Whenever you want something to be really shown to the customer, focus there rather than focusing on the design aspects of the resume.
So normally, do you have a place where you go to getting some templates? Like, how do you start?
I've used enhanced CV in the past, but honestly, the format of my resume in the last 10 years haven't changed. I only changed the content within that, but the format literally stayed the same.
Yeah, I think I've done the same too. But there, like
Yeah, I
anybody who
don't like
wants,
changing formats as well unless it's not working. I
yeah.
felt it worked. I mean, similar approach. Just
Yeah,
change the
but
content.
for anybody, right? Even I haven't changed, but anybody who wants to start or at least have a place of reference, I think Microsoft has a lot of good templates. We can give that in the description too. So they give you different formats and also cover letter formats based on the title and all of that stuff, so that at least you'll get a starting point. And even looks like, right, like when you're editing a resume in Microsoft Word, it gives you suggestions on the top, on the right. It was even before chat gpt days. I'm saying, this was like 2 or 3 days, years prior to chat gpt. And you can actually get some inspiration from that, based on like how people have quantified things, the format and all of that stuff. So that could be some useful tool for people to use. So I also want to mention there are two other tools which you can use. So there is one specific website called Kick Resume. So what it does is you basically upload your resume there, and it gives you a resume score. And the score is basically determined based on like how the spacing is, what the font is, and how many bullet points you have in each section, and how quantified numbers you have in each bullet section. So it'll actually give you at least the basic things to get right. So as you improve your resume, your score improves. So that's something which people can explore. And there's also a website called jobscan.co. This website basically, you go and upload your resume and also add the job description, and it tells you, is your resume good enough for this job description, or should you make improvements, and also I think suggests improvements. So this could be also another handy tool for anybody who's starting to compile the resume.
Awesome. Actually, it just reminded me of something. On the top of the resume, right? One thing we totally forgot is mentioning probably their phone number, their LinkedIn profile, and email. Yeah. I think email and phone number, typically people don't miss it because that's where they get the calls. I've seen people not mentioning their LinkedIn profiles.
Yeah.
I would highly encourage people doing that, because that LinkedIn doesn't have any restrictions. You can add whatever you want. So if someone is really keen on your profile, the first place they would go is LinkedIn and then add it there. One thing that I would also suggest is making that URL simpler, so that if someone needs to type it, they don't type it wrong. So keep it simple so that folks can easily find your profile.
One quick question, right? So you have interviewed other guys, right? Like, have you previously, when you are going to an interview, went to their LinkedIn profile and checked their profile?
I've done that for a couple of people actually, especially when I'm like questioning some of the things. For example, I've seen someone's resume saying that they are a startup founder and they've done certain things. I wanted to understand more about that. So at that point, I went to their LinkedIn profile and tried to find out additional details, because I couldn't find URLs about that company, or I couldn't find any relevant documentation for that company. So just to understand what exactly is their company, what do they do, I tried to like find more details, but
Yeah.
in that scenario it was not helpful, but only in such scenario where I want to find more details, I've done that.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's helpful, right? Like if you do not know the company where the person is worked for, you can actually go to that profile and see what the company is about and all of that. So it gives you more insights. If you really want to spend so much time, you can actually go to his LinkedIn profile, his or her LinkedIn profile.
And the other side, I think it's very important for the candidates also when they're applying for jobs and they're interviewing, they have to go through the LinkedIn profile of the people they're interviewing. So they know, they can at least have a high level understanding of what can be expected and what expertise that interviewer has. So they can accordingly prepare.
That's called stalking, Srinath. That's called stalking.
Yeah, that stalking is important, I feel, especially during interviews.
Yeah,
Okay.
professional stalking is good. It's good
Yes.
to understand what are the key areas that the interviewer is focusing on. It might give you a context of the initiatives or the products that they have built in the past. At the end of the interview is a conversation. As long as you can get a good conversation with the interviewer, that might take you places. So, in order for you to make that conversation, that professional stalking is useful.
Yeah, I think you touched this a little bit earlier, like kind of what the teams may be focusing on the next quarter or two. I think stalking the LinkedIn profile also helps you to align with the person's thinking, because when you have that conversation, you both are on a similar path and have a similar mindset, a similar thinking. That will closely resonate and help a lot, I feel, during the interview.
Yeah, even
And
now
another thing that
LinkedIn has an option where, like, when you somebody posts a job, right, it actually gives you a list of people who are part of the team or has posted the job, so you'll know like what the team has worked before and what are their expertise at. And also it's a good conversation starter, right, as Fanny was mentioning. And also, if you want to send them a cold email, right, cold email or a cold message on LinkedIn, you could start with some of their experiments, accomplishments, right? Like, maybe you could start with saying, I've just read your I came across your blog which you have written last week, and I like these so and so points. And then you can say, I like your profile a lot, and I would want to basically go in your path and want to learn how you have managed to end up in this job. And then you can start that conversation.
Yep. Especially when the other person is active on LinkedIn, that will give you a lot of pointers to make a good conversation. So definitely do that. But if you're conscious on what the other person would think about you, then do it in an incognito or something like that so that your profile is not seen there. But have a brief look at the other person's profile so that you get an understanding of that person and understand what you can talk to them.
Yeah, we should also do a
Cool.
deep dive
Awesome.
on LinkedIn, I guess, sometime. It's like, how can we improve our
Yeah,
LinkedIn rates? Now it's almost second to your resume.
Yep,
that's true.
I'm up for it.
Let's awesome conversation, guys. Let's end with this thing, right? If there is a couple of things that you want our viewers to take away from this video, what would that be? Srinath, let me start with you.
I mean, the two things I'll say is resume space is the most expensive space. So utilize it effectively and make sure only relevant points are captured. The second is the impact of your work. So whatever you do, it doesn't matter. What was the result probably matters more. So I'll see both of these are important. I mean, maybe let me take a step back. The second point probably I'll clarify is what you do is not only important, but the result is also important. So highlighting the result along with what you did is very important.
Yeah.
Siddhu, what do you
So
think?
my takeaways
I
would
think those
be,
are my two
right,
takeaways.
in this downturn, right, like where there are very less jobs available and there are a lot of people applying. So I think generic way of applying is not working. So customize the heck out of your resume. So there's no limit for customizing your resume. So make sure you resonate each and every bullet point, saying that, I'm the most eligible person for that job. So make sure you do that. That's the first thing. Second one is like, um, you know mention that impact which you have created. Make that first impression through your resume. It's your marketing material that can impress you and get you to the next step, which is your interview.
Yep, makes sense. My two takeaways is first thing is like if you're creating your resume new or if you're updating your resume after a long time, dump your thoughts first. Like, even if it goes to like 2 3 pages, doesn't matter. Dump your thoughts first, then go through each and every point to see, is it actually making an impact? Like, imagine that you are the interviewer reading that. Does it even matter? Then start cutting everything ruthlessly, if you think it doesn't make sense. The second one I would say is, don't really focus on beautifying the resume. Honestly, I've gone through several resumes. I've never picked a resume thinking that this looks awesome. Focus really on the impact that the resume is causing. Spend a lot of time on that. And a lot of people are conscious about sharing their resume to other people and getting it reviewed. I would say don't do that. Like, send it to as many people as you want, and get that feedback. People are usually ruthless when they're reviewing other people's resume, and it'll be a benefit for you. So keep doing that. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for the time. Have a nice day. See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Stop this.